Hello, hello. Believe we are live. We're just going to give it a few seconds for the audio checks to come through. Make sure you guys can hear my voice. While we do that, if folks are tuning in, definitely feel free to let me know who's attending, your name, where you're from, things like that. Okay, audio checks look good. So we'll get started. This is going to be a pretty short demo. Just want to show how easy it is to create a FHIR store using Google Cloud's healthcare API. And so the intent of this is basically you probably have heard about FHIR, especially from me multiple times, and you need to get that data into a medium in which you can analyze and inspect data somehow. So what I'm going to do is show you how you can take some data that's already in FHIR, put it into a FHIR store, and then from there you can go ahead and do whatever you want with it. You can perform basic FHIR searches to view the data, or you can export it into another cloud solution from Google called BigQuery and do just typical SQL queries against it. But tons of different things you can do. This video would be pretty basic to just grab data in FHIR, upload it into a FHIR store that you create, and then from there you can do whatever you want. But I think this is a pretty important step for you to help learn how to work with FHIR data. So what I'm going to do first is share my screen. So I have Google pulled up. And what I'm going to do is use a tool called Cynthia. If you're not familiar with Cynthia, it's a tool that is used to generate synthetic patient data. And one of the nice things about it is they can generate a bunch of data for you in FHIR. So we're going to use that to upload into our FHIR store. It's very realistic. You can read more about it. It's nice because you can generate a fake patient and then a bunch of other data elements, or rather resources associated with it, like different labs, their addresses, the medications they're on, just different things like that. So it's very, very useful, and it's supposed to be very realistic. I'm not going to use this tool to generate. I'm just going to download pre-generated data. So if I go over here, there's a bunch of things you can download, even specialized data for like oncology or obesity, COVID-19, things like that. We're just going to grab a super simple subset of data. So here is 100 sample synthetic patient records. It's actually I'm grabbing this one that's already in FHIR. I'm going to use FHIR R4. Click on that. It's going to go ahead and download it for me. I'm actually only going to grab one single patient from the sample, so I'm not even going to upload all of them. Let me actually show you what that looks like so you can see what I'm going to upload. Let me see. Actually, can I share my screen for this one? Play screen sharing with, here it is. So here is a single patient from that Cynthia data set. And if you're familiar with FHIR, many things, especially groups of resources, are in a resource type called a bundle. And so in this bundle, my very first one, where's the entry? Oh, here it is. The very first entry here is a patient resource and has all the data associated with that patient. If I keep going down, here's another one. This one's for an encounter. And this is a single file with all the different resources associated with that patient. So a bunch of different resources. This one's an encounter. I'll find like observations, meds, condition, things like that, all related to the first patient that's in this data set. Okay, so this is what we're going to upload to the Google FHIR store. Let me go back to my website. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is go to Google. And I try to start with Google because everyone who is not as tech savvy understands Google, and it should be super simple. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go Google Cloud. Right? I'm logged. I need to actually change my login to this one. So once I'm logged in, on the top right is a console. So I'm going to the Google Cloud console. And the first thing I'm going to do is to create a project. And that's on here. I have a bunch of different projects already. I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. It's really nice because it consolidates all the things that you need within the project. The billing can be contained within that project. But regardless, the first thing you need to do is create a project. And so what I'm going to do for this one is I'm going to do a Firestore demo. Firestore demo uploading data. All right, I'm going to go ahead and create that project. It takes probably just a couple seconds to create the project. Once it's done, I'll let you know. There it is. This is now complete. I have my new project. I'm already in the project. If you're not in the project, you're going to make sure you're on the project in the top left. And then there's a couple things you need to do to get started with creating your Firestore. The very first thing is you want to go to healthcare. This is already pinned for me. So if it's not pinned, you have to go view all products and then search for healthcare. I'm going to click on healthcare. And it's going to take me to this Cloud Healthcare API. And this is what we're going to use to create our Firestore. And the first thing you would do is hit enable because it's not enabled. You have to associate with a billing project. So let me actually go and enable billing. A lot of these services, especially for like low volume use like this, ends up being free. And most of the charges usually is when you have a lot more data. So for this one, it should be pretty simple. And I'm just going to delete the project afterwards. So I shouldn't really be charged anything, to be honest, because it's pretty small of a project. So that can take a second. Looks like it's turning. So there it is. So now I have a project. I enabled billing for this project. Now I actually need to go back to, oh, actually it's enabled. So healthcare is now enabled. Once the Google Healthcare API is enabled, the next thing you do is you have to create a data set. This is where you're going to store all the data for healthcare. It's not just going to be FHIR. You can store other things as well. But the first thing we would need to do is create a data set. So you can tell I already started doing a couple of demos for this. Data set for FHIR demo 2. I'm just going to use that. You have to give your data set a name. Store it in a region. So in this case, I'm going to store it over here. I'm going to create my data set. And so after you create a data set, you need to create a data store. In this, for our purposes, it'll be the FHIR data store. But within this data set, as I mentioned earlier, you can store many different types of data stores. You can have like a HL7 version 2 data store. You can have a DICOM data store. There's just multiple stores that you can have. You can even have multiple of these too. So if you wanted to have multiple FHIR data stores, you can also do that. I think this step can take a little bit more time. So let me see if I can just navigate somewhere else real quick. While it's doing that, one of the other things you're going to need to do is you're going to have to create a Google Cloud bucket. And the bucket is basically a way for you to take data that you care about and then upload it to the bucket. And then when we're bringing in data from the outside world into our Firestore, you have to use the bucket to do so. So one of the steps we're going to have to do is create a bucket. So we're going to do that while we're waiting for the data set to be created. And how you do that is you go over to the left tab for the menu and go to Google Cloud Storage Buckets. If you don't have this pinned like I do, just go to the View All Products and search for Google Cloud Storage. I'm going to go to my buckets. And I have no buckets right now, as you can see down here. And so I'm going to create a new bucket over here. And I'm going to give this bucket a bucket for uploading FHIR data. That's what I'm going to call it. I'm going to take all the defaults. I don't really care to select any of these. If you want to configure it further, you can, but most of the default settings are pretty good. Just configures your bucket for uploading. So that's it. Only took like a few seconds. And I'm going to upload a file. And you can't actually see it on your screen, but it just basically asks me, where do I want to upload data from? And I'm going to grab the JSON file that you saw earlier, which is a bundle of resources, and go ahead and upload that. So it's a single patient with a bunch of FHIR resources associated with it. So that's that file. Only took a few seconds to upload. Now our bucket is set up. If I go back to the data set, my data set is also now created. So that's great. I'm going to go ahead and enter my data set. Once I'm in my data set, I'm going to have to create a data store. So this is where you create your FHIR data store. Go ahead, do this, and it asks you what type do you want to create. I want a FHIR data store. I want a FHIR data store for demo. Whatever ID you want to name it, do that. We want to usually configure this as a R4 because that's the first normative release for FHIR. So R4. You can add additional settings if you want to. I'm just going to take all the defaults because that's pretty good already. You have the option to add IGs or implementation guides. So very popular ones like from DaVinci, US Core, things like that. I'm not going to do that. Just going to skip that. If you do, it'll import a bunch of resources like code systems and value sets from that IG. And it's great for validation. But again, I'm just going to take all these defaults just to make this demo super simple. So now I have my data store. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter the data store by clicking it. And it'll give me some basic metrics for the data store. So I have a FHIR data store. It tells of this type. There's different information. If you want to change any of those things, you can do so on the screen. You can also go to the metrics tab to look at what's in your FHIR data store. Give me 1 second. Okay, so now that we have that complete, we have our data store. Now we're going to upload data here from our cloud bucket. And how we're going to do that is on the top right over here, there's an import button. And then it's going to ask you, where do you want to upload it from? And this is why we created that cloud bucket earlier. So I'm going to browse, and this is the bucket that I have that has that JSON file. So I'm going to select that bucket. And then remember, when we were looking at that JSON file, it wasn't a resource like one of these, it was a bundle. And then that bundle was not a new line delineated JSON or ND JSON because not each line didn't represent a single bundle. Each line actually spanned multiple lines. So we're going to select this one when uploading data from the Cynthia dataset. So I'm going to select that. Go ahead and import. It looks like I got an error. And the error is basically saying the healthcare service agent is missing permissions. So there's a lot of this permission sometimes that you're run into when you're working with the healthcare API. That healthcare API has a service account. You basically need to give permissions to that service account to do some of these different cloud operations. So this is a pretty simple one. We just need to go to IAM to add this role. So storage object viewer. Okay. We'll go over to the left here, and I don't have this up, so I'm going to search for it. And so here it is. I'm just going to pin it for next time. IAM and admin. We're going to go there. And what we're going to do is on the screen, I need to click this to view all my service accounts. There's only one. And this is that healthcare service agent. So whenever you want it to be able to go to different cloud resources and do things, you need to give this account the permissions to do so. So I'm going to edit. I'm going to add storage. I think it was called viewer or something. Cloud storage. I think it's this one. Okay, I think it's this one. Storage object viewer. Go ahead and save it. And so now this is updated. If I go back to healthcare browser, hopefully that worked. Go back to my data set. I'm going to try to re-import again, select my bucket. All right, select the bundle pretty. Looks like it didn't give me the error, so that update worked. And so you can view the operation, but it was actually pretty quick. It just happened in probably less than a second. Process 773 FHIR resources associated with that patient. And then what we can do next is we can go into this browser again, and we can take a look at what it uploaded. So if I go into metrics, let me collapse this. Now I can see that from that operation, I have 16 resource types from FHIR, and then there are 773 resources, and this is the total size. So that was a single patient that you can see here. That patient had 290 observation resources, 50 medication requests, so on and so forth for these FHIR resources. And then we can inspect each one of them if we go to the FHIR viewer. So I'm going to go ahead and go into my FHIR store. I can browse for my patient. So here's a patient. It's just one patient. And I can take a look at very quick snapshot details. I can look at the elements. So let's see. We have a name. The name is Wilma. Last name Blick. There's identifiers for them. There's a Cynthia identifier, some hospital identifier, MRN identifier, social security, things like that. And then we can also inspect the raw JSON if we wanted to. This is a great way to look at stuff. And let's go check out one more thing, which is an observation resource. If you look at the observation resource, you can find a bunch of resources. You can do the same thing. Here's all the different data elements if you like looking at it like this. Or you can look at the JSON itself. The last thing I'll show before ending the demo is that now, if you looked at a previous video that I did on FHIR search, you can use that knowledge to search the FHIR store for these different FHIR resources. So for example, let's say let's see, potassium. Potassium is always an interesting lab. So we have a potassium lab here. And let's say you want to find all potassium labs that are in a status of final. We don't have to actually add the patient in here because all the observations we uploaded was for a single patient. So we know that this subject, which is the patient field, are all the same. So I don't need to add that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for all observations with a status of final. That is a potassium code from Loink. And so what I'm going to do is, let me copy this real quick. This code, copy 62984, and I'm going to search. So this is your standard FHIR search. Go ahead and do observation. You add a question mark to let them know that you're doing a search. And I'm going to do a status, which is the search parameter equals. Final is the value that I'm searching for, and hit run search. Now I can see, does it show how many numbers I have? I don't think it does. Search results. Okay, well, oh, it's down here. So there's 1 to 50 of many because I assume all these observations are final. Then let me add another search parameter, which is code. And I want it to equal the lab for potassium. So if I run search, if you look down here, this is 1 of 50 of many. If I run this search, now there's only 13. And so the only observation resources I get now are potassium ones. Let me do one more now in the demo. Is usually when you're searching observations, you probably also want to look at the value. So in this case, there is a value quantity, 3.74. And so I might do a value. I actually don't remember the search parameter. Let me just look that up real quick. I don't remember what the search parameter is. You search, go down to search parameters, value, where's value? Value quantity. So the search parameter is value quantity. So we go back here, value quantity equals, we'll do GT for greater than, and 3. Hopefully that works. Run search. Cool, that worked. So what I'm searching here is for value quantity, which is, I know that the values in potassium labs are of type quantity. So you have to use this search parameter. And then GT is greater than 3. So we all know that potassium labs that are greater than 5 to 5.5 are abnormal. So you might want to search something like, let's see if there's any potassium labs greater less than, let's do 5. There are none greater than 5. Let's do 4 instead. There's a great couple, there's 11 of them that are greater than 4. So if we click on this, now you can see here, these values on the left-hand side are all greater than 4. So hopefully that was interesting. It should have been pretty easy to just take data from FHIR, upload it to a FHIR store, and then you can do a bunch of things with it, like these FHIR searches. And then most people will probably be interested in a subsequent step where you can take all the data in your FHIR store and then export it to BigQuery, where you can write a bunch of SQL queries against it. All right, that's the end of this demo. Hopefully that was interesting. And at some point in time, I will create more shorter, smaller exercises that will upload to OpenCleanTech for this.